this is Erin coming from Medellin, Colombia. Today I will be with my friend Cassandra and we will be talking about how she came to Colombia and made it work. All in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. All right, Cass, so we have drank a lot of coffees in our time since we've lived in Colombia together.
We have.
But what's your go-to order?
Usually an Americano.
Great choice.
Yeah.
That's a great choice.
It's perfect with Colombian coffee.
It is.
You don't need anything else with it.
No, you really don't. So yeah, how did you end up here? Why Colombia? Was it a country that you had in mind? Was it a place that you had always dreamed about living, or how did you get here?
No, actually it was quite accidental. I ended up quitting my job in New Zealand and I had enough money to save up to travel for what I thought was a year before moving to Canada. However, about 8 months in, I'd been in Peru and in Ecuador. 8 months in, I basically ran out of money. So I had a friend from uni who was living here and she mentioned it's a great place to be for nomads and to get online work. So I asked my parents for a loan.
Nice.
And they said, you either have to get a ticket home or make it work somehow. So I came to Colombia, I think, just at the beginning of December 2017.
Fantastic. So now we're in 2020. How have you made it work for the last 3 years?
It's been it's been interesting. So within the first week or two, I actually got a job online with a company that's based here, but they work with US clients. So I sort of started just before Christmas of 2017, but probably got into it the following year. It ended up being a role as a commercial mortgage broker, which I knew nothing about. I've never had any experience. My background is in speech therapy. So yeah, I kind of got into that, and the first year went really well. So after traveling a little bit in Canada and Mexico and then Christmas at home, I decided to come back to Medellin at the beginning of 2019 and get an apartment and make it work. So in that time before that, I'd been here for around 7 or 8 months in total.
So you mentioned a little bit that you worked as a speech therapist and then you ended up here and you kind of fell into a different job that was unrelated to what you were doing before. So how has it been making it work in a new country with a new job, learning the ropes of everything? How have you sustained your life here?
It's been a challenge. It's a completely different field, but I think I got quite lucky in that it was a startup business, so there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of excitement at the beginning. It's been interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, now that you're here and you've been at that job for the last 3 years, what has surprised you? What have you been learning? What are some insights into how it's been?
Here in Medellin?
Yeah.
It's been interesting because when I first came here, and I guess the first year, I had quite a different view of what it was like here because I was living more like a traveler. Because I didn't have my own apartment or anything like that. So when I made the decision to get my own apartment and furnish it, then I got sort of a different view of the expat life here and making things work. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and I've met a lot of amazing people, and it's been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I know of you, something that you really enjoy about living here is the fact that your money goes so far. I know that when you lived in New Zealand, you were worried about money and rent and everything, and I guess it would be nice to share a little bit about how far can your money go here? A lot of people who haven't lived abroad, I think they don't understand exactly, just how much you can make it work with, with not a whole lot. So how has that been for you?
Yeah, that's completely right. New Zealand's very expensive. So you know, you don't need a lot to live here. It depends on obviously how you want to live. But for an example, I had a nice apartment, and I paid around, forgive me, I don't know US dollars very well, but I think it was around 1,100 New Zealand dollars a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. I mean, in Auckland, you'd be paying at least 3 times that. So yeah, it's really interesting and really makes it difficult to leave, I think, because it's tempting to be here when you can live a good life with such a little amount.
Totally, I totally agree. So oftentimes plans change, especially when you're living abroad. You started out at a job that you weren't expecting. Are you still at that job, or what have you been up to in the last few months?
Yeah, so actually I just resigned recently. I sort of went through a period during the quarantine and whatnot of examining what I want in life and where I want to go. And one of the great things about living in Medellin is that the cost of living is relatively low compared to New Zealand. So I decided to shift gears and change careers. So I'm actually studying now. And if you are over 24 and you're studying with a New Zealand institution, you actually get income from the government. So that's primarily what I'm living on now.
Do you mind sharing with us just a little bit how much that is and,
Sure.
and how far that can go here?
Yeah, sure. So I get 330 New Zealand dollars a week, which equates to around 3.2 million pesos. So here, I mean, that goes really far, you know.
Yeah, what can that get you for someone that doesn't have any perspective of what that could go? I mean, how well can you live for 3.2 million pesos a month?
Well, as an example, you know, the apartment that I was speaking of was a couple years old, on the 8th floor, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and that was 2.3 million pesos. So that gives you an idea of the cost of living for an apartment. And I would say I would spend, it depends, you know, right now it's slightly different with everything that's going on, but I'd probably spend about between 1 million to 1.5 million on food and going out a month.
So about $400 more or less.
Right, and I never really held back, you know, going to cafes and things like that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely one of the things that makes it hard for expats to leave is the fact that your money does go so far here, and you know, just a cup of coffee is about $1, and you know, you can eat a delicious meal for $10 and take a beautiful weekend trip to the Caribbean and for $200.
Exactly, and you know, it is slightly different when you're coming from another currency other than the US. Like in New Zealand dollars, all of those things are a little bit more, but still, relatively speaking, I mean, for an example, in New Zealand I was renting a room and paying about $250 a week just for a room in a house. You know, so if I was getting my income in New Zealand, I would not be able to live. But here I can have a lovely home and you know, live fairly well, drink nice wine and coffee and have nice food.
That says it all.
Exactly.
So what are your future plans here in Medellin?
Well, I'm not really sure at the moment. So I was planning to go to Europe and then come back here. I have a visa until March next year. But you know, things are kind of up in the air right now with COVID. So I'm not really sure at the moment. Like I said, my visa is until March, so I'll stay at least probably until then.
Perfect.
And then see where life takes me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the visa, because one of the reasons that you've been able to stay here for so long is because your work provided a visa. How was that process? Was it relatively easy?
Yeah, it was. So the first year I was just on a tourist visa. 6 months, whatever that was. And then my company sponsored me for the visa. So they had hired an accountant and they basically did everything. So I didn't really need to do anything, and I just had to turn up at the embassy or immigration.
Stamp your passport and call it a day.
Exactly. So I think for some people it's a slightly different process. But yeah, I was really lucky in that a lot of it was done for me.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Nice.
so.
Well, what would you say to someone who's looking to move abroad? They're not quite sure what to do. They don't know if they're going to be able to make it work. What advice would you give as someone who's done that? You're an example of someone who they ran out of money when they were traveling and they landed in Colombia. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, I always just think if you want to do it, you'll make it work. And you know, most of the time we're in a position where we're really lucky as people from the US or New Zealand or Australia or wherever it may be, and that we could always get a job online teaching English, for example. So you just got to know where to look and how to ask, because there's so much out there. And yeah, it might not be, you know, the kind of pay that you're used to, but you're also living in a very different environment. So I think honestly, if you want to go, because it's not just about the money. You learn so much and you experience so much, and yeah, I wouldn't take it back at all.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here, Cass. I appreciate you sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks everyone for following along with Erin's Conversations Over Coffee. Be sure to check out TCI to follow along with other expat stories and how they've made it work in different countries. See you soon.